Okay, guys, so this is for TEAK, 6.7 folder. And so the things that you need to be reminded of are the things that we learned about mid-year, I guess, if you will. You kind of learned this stuff in elementary too, so you kind of have to go back to that prior knowledge and you have to go back to the knowledge that we showed you. So first things first, we need to talk about those exponents. Remember that when we have a base and an exponent, this exponent in base. Sorry, I'm going to label so you can see this. Exponent tells us how many times we're going to repeat as a factor the base. So example, if I have 2 to the third power, I need to repeat 3 times these 2 as factors. So what that means is this is the same as 2 times 2 times 2. This told me how many times to repeat, and so I'm going to write that how many times to repeat the, and I'm so sorry if I stopped writing, the base as factors. Alright, so then this said I have a base of 2 and I want to repeat it 3 times as factors. So here's 1 factor, 2 factors, 3 factors. So just some information. When it asks you to find the equivalent form of it, you literally have to find the equivalent form of the information, the expressions. So the easiest way to do it is to solve the first expression and then kind of get rid of some of the answer choices from what's given. If it says which one's not equivalent, that means a few of them are going to be equivalent. So you're going to have to use your best judgment. Pay attention to those not words. Whenever it asks for prime factorization, the state of Texas does like to test you guys for prime factorization. Remember, it's those factor trees, and you need to know some important information. You need to know the difference between prime and composite. Remember that a prime number only has one factor set. That means it can only be multiplied by the number and 1. That's the only factor set. So for example, to get to 2, the only way I can get to 2 by multiplying is 2 times 1. To get to 7, the only way I can get to 7 by multiplying is 7 times 1. Now, if I have a number like 4, I can get to 4 by multiplying 4 times 1, but I can also multiply 2 times 2. And that's no longer prime, because prime is the number and 1, only one factor set, like I have here and here. This has more than 1, that makes it composite. So if it has a composite number, and if you need to do something like build your U-turn, remember you'd put the number on top and you split it, and it would literally be 1 times 4 and 2 times 2, and we don't want to repeat, so we're done. Okay, so use the things that you know from it. Use elimination process. If you see composite numbers that have more than one factor set, then get rid of it. It's not your answer for today. There's lots of prime factorization. You can solve them. You can get rid of some answer choices that way. Let's see. Look for those key words. There's some problems in here that ask you, per hour. Remember that word per means to multiply. So I'm going to give you that hint. Per equals to multiply. And then if we have words like spend or difference, that means to subtract. So I'm going to write the word spend for you, and that means to subtract. And those are just some hints so that way you can solve it if they have those words in order to build the equation. A lot of this is just being able to build the equations and using the different properties. So because we need to go over the properties, I want to do some reminders. Remember the distributive property. That's the main one that's going to be in this folder. The distributive property has a number on the outside, and I put it underlined because it's going to be important. And then there may be a number here and then maybe an add or subtract sign. So I'm going to put add and then a number. Okay, so I'm going to expand it with real numbers so that way you're like, number, number, number. Okay, so if I had 3 on the outside and then I had 4 plus 2, and I wanted to use a distributive property, and right here, distributive, that means I'm going to give what's on the outside number, to everything on the inside by multiplying. Think about it like on Christmas when your grandpa gives all the teenagers, the same amount of money. Everybody's getting distributed the same amount. So we're going to give it to one and the other. This problem is set up as 3 times 4 plus 3 times 2. That's what we're doing when we distribute from the outside to the inside. So just keep that in mind. Remember, we have the identity property. Identity property. It's you get out what you put in. So when it would be taking a number and timesing it by 1, you're going to get the same number. And whenever you take a number and add 0, you're still going to get the exact same number. So just remember that. Here's the important piece, and I'm going to go ahead and put it in a different color over it so that way you remember. Okay, so it's identity. What you start with, you get out. What you start with, you get out. The other properties that's in here is commutative. That means order doesn't matter. Commutative. Commutative. Think about that fact family. Think about that fact family. Remember, you can change the order. Order doesn't matter. And that happens with multiplying or adding. Okay, so 3 plus 2 is the same as, or is equivalent to 2 plus 3. And 3 times 2 is the same as 2 times 3. So they're the same, so just remember that. You also have associative property. That's when the grouping changes, but the numbers don't. Like the order's not changing. So associative property. Associative property. Okay, so an example of that is if I had 3 plus 3 plus 4, and my grouping changed to be the same, but instead in parentheses is 3 plus 3 plus 4. So that's the associative property. It's just the grouping that changes. And then inverse. Inverse, remember, means the opposite. It's when you're using the opposite. So inverse. Inverse property, that's the opposite. Okay, and so when we use opposites for adding, it would be like 3, which is positive, and we don't normally write the positive side, minus 3, and that would get us 0. And then the inverse for multiplying would be like 3 times 1/3, and that would equal 1. Because the inverse of 3 is 1/3. It's the flip, that reciprocal. So just remember that whenever you're looking at it. Let's see. That should be everything here. Just make sure that you give it a shot before you give up and say I can't. Make sure you've asked a shoulder partner. Make sure you flip your card to red if you need assistance. And or raise your hand if your teacher changed it to raise your hand. And move on to a new problem so that way you're not stuck on that one. And when your teacher comes by to assist you, they can help you. All right, good luck.